never know if it could change your life. Take a chance, you're neither wrong or right. You never know if you don't roll them dice. You better roll them dice.
All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of Dungeon Master of None.
I'm Dungeon Master Matt.
And I'm Dungeon Master Rob.
I don't know why we're talking so slowly, but we're here to help you solve all your Dungeons & Dragons problems, like finding friends in your 30s.
Yes, if you were ever wondering about those fiddly life problems, adult problems, like why don't I have any friends? How do I be more confident in board meetings? Why can't I bullshit to the cop who pulled me over? We have all the answers, and the answers are all called Play Dungeons and Dragons. So welcome to the podcast that helps you develop all the life skills that you didn't develop in your teens because you were playing Dungeons and Dragons.
If you have ever gotten out of a ticket because you play Dungeons & Dragons, please let us know.
Tell us how that worked. I have BS
do you think
my way
any
through...
cops play Dungeons & Dragons?
Oh, certainly. And I'm going to go ahead and leave my thoughts on that unsaid.
All right.
Because, I don't want to offend our soft centrist listeners too much. We already lost a few over our John McCain comments, so we'll keep our cop comments to ourselves.
Yeah.
But today, what are we talking about, Matt?
We're talking about Baldur's Gate, Descent to Avernus.
That's right.
The 7th full-length adventure from Wizards of the Coast for 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons.
Yeah, we have a lot to say about this. First, we want to talk very briefly about the brand.
We got to get this done, Rob. There's another hardcover coming out in less than a month.
I know. Eberron is coming out soon, very, very soon. Yeah, sorry it took us so long to get to this. I'm not sorry we're doing this for free. Fucking deal with it. But also, I did mean to get to this sooner. So, but first, let's talk very briefly about the new Unearthed Arcana Fighter, Ranger, and Rogue. Matt, do you think that this indicates that Wizards is going to release a new Xanathar's Guide type book that includes all sorts of...
Yeah, it's inevitable.
I think we're getting real close. Keep your eyes peeled for the next Xanathars with all sorts of subclasses in it. And possibly the Mystic. I think they actually have probably just, abandoned the Mystic entirely, right?
They're like, this is too much work. Let's skip it.
Quite frankly, that is what I think the internal conversations at Wizards are. They're like, well, this is too much work. We don't like psionics. All of us are grognards who didn't like that part of 3.5, so we're just going to leave it behind. Anyway, what happened in this new Unearthed Arcana? There are 3 new archetypes for the Fighter, Ranger, and Rogue. The Rune Knight for the Fighter, the Swarm Keeper for the Ranger, and the Revived for the Rogue.
Revived. Right.
So let's just go in order. We're not going to spend a lot of time on this, and I'll be frank, because I don't think this is groundbreaking, but I do want to at least touch on it. So first, the Rune Knight. Matt?
These are 3 classes that add a lot for classes that don't normally get a lot of magical powers. And the Rune Knight is case in point. Have you ever wanted to make a Eldritch Knight that was a little more straightforward to play? There you go. Here's a Rune Knight.
I like the Rune Knight.
It gets big.
Yep, I like the Rune Knight best of all because it's simple, relatively simple, and it has a good theme, right? It's based around giants, right? You are a fighter that draws strength from one or more of the giant archetypes by inscribing runes upon your weapons. Great for dwarves, great for Nordic types, great for people who want to wield a big fucking hammer and get huge. Mechanically, I think this is probably actually sort of weak, but I'll tell you what I do like about the mechanics of this. All of the effects, the storm runes, and the sort of giant related features, powers are strong but limited in use. So this is a real Nova type fighter, right? You can have one really impressive combat a day, or maybe two, where you get big, you blow up somebody with your mighty hammer, and that's fun. I think that's a good balance, right? I think this is a good way to balance the game. Some classes get extra powerful abilities that they can't use a whole lot, and others get substantially more effective over an adventuring day powers, but that are not as flashy. So I think this is I think I would play this. I would play a Rune Knight. I like the idea behind it. Matt's complaint that I think we have both made this is that I don't think that Wizards knows what to do with just straight up martial characters. And so their only way to get creative is to add magic to martial classes. I don't have a problem with...
That's fine. It's a magic game. However, lots of people, myself included, like playing a non-magical hero in a magic world.
Right. And there are other ways to give heroes magical level abilities that do not require them to actually cast spells or use runes. That being said, this is pretty good. I like it. Big fan of the Rune Knight. You get big, you hit people with your hammer. I would absolutely play this. Seems like a lot of fun. It doesn't seem broken. I'm into it.
Minor quibbles are things like the fire rune basically like shackles your enemies to the ground. I was like, why doesn't it just make your weapon light on fire? That's what I wanted.
Yeah, that was weird. Some of the giant powers are more on brand than others. The fire one seemed weird. It seems like they ran out of ideas.
But some of them are very cool. Like you get a prophetic state of the future for storm giants or something like that. That's a fun thing for a fighter.
There's a lot of neat things here. The only downside is that you really don't get to use them very often. So it will make your fighter interesting and powerful for brief moments, but they will not probably use these abilities substantially throughout the campaign, which is okay.
Which is fine. You're a fighter, not a wizard or a cleric.
The rest of the time, you can hit things with your hammer, which is exactly what you should be doing most of the time anyway. I'm actually a big fan of the Rune Knight. I think it's good. Not great, but good. All right,
my favorite of the three, Ranger Swarm Keeper.
All right, so...
you want to be Pigpen surrounded by like a swarm of cockroaches that obey your commands?
Yeah.
Sure.
So this
can finally be a garbage ranger.
This idea posits that you have a swarm of fey spirits that flutter around you and do things. On first blush, this seems weak. The abilities are not particularly impressive. It's also sort of weird. I will say, I do like the idea of, like, surrounding yourself with butterflies and having, like, being, like, a butterfly ranger who's, like, fey butterflies fuck people up. But...
Butterfly Ranger Sky.
Aside from, like, the, like, giggling idea of, you know, fighting with a swarm of fey, I don't know, mosquitoes or something, I can't say that I really recommend anything about this. I feel like I would rather just like hack an animal companion ranger to have like a swarm of rats or something and just keep everything the same than use this feature. It just I'm not a fan. It just doesn't seem very good.
I would say because your little swarm, as far as I can tell, can't be killed, it's way better than having an animal companion that can be
that's a good
targeted. So for that reason alone, I think it's better. But and you can do a lot of things with it. I think it just depends on whether you like this flavor or not. This is one that begs to be reskinned as a million other things, right? If you want to play a character that has a protoplasm power or can create force constructs like a Green Lantern of some kind, then you could take this archetype and reskin it.
I guess there are bits of this that are a little bit like what was the summoner that could like wear their Eidolon in Pathfinder? What was that called? That was the really like broken one. You know what I'm talking about?
Yes, I do.
Sonia had...
I'm really sad I know what you're talking about, but yes, I do.
Anyway, there are parts of this that are a bit like that, so you can, like, gather your swarm around you and fly a little bit, or climb a little bit, or move faster. I don't know. It just, like, it allows you to do a little bit of extra damage. I just don't think it's better than having an extra body on the field, even if that body is vulnerable to being targeted. It doesn't seem better than having a bear, or a wolf, or even a hawk. But, you know what? It's kind of neat. I don't know. I'm not a fan. It seems weird. It doesn't seem very powerful, and it just seems kind of poorly thought out and implemented, in my opinion.
This archetype is for the player character who constantly wants to say things like, I enter the room, 12 rats scuttle across my face. What's the reaction of the priest that we were sent to talk to? Like, okay, all right, man. Yeah.
If somebody wants to like really creep out, somebody wants to create a really creepy bug lover character, and like existing character options are not sufficiently gross and creepy, then this is the option for them. But,
speaking of gross and creepy, the roguish archetype is the revived.
Yeah, so this is...
Death walks among us.
I almost don't even want to talk about this, because it just seems like a really weird mismatch. The idea is that like this rogue archetype remembers being dead or has a previous life, and so they've got like some like undead powers.
Yeah, you've got a little bit of like warlock-like necromantic powers. You can shoot bolts of necrotic energy, which is not what I sort of expected from a, kind of slippery undead rogue, right? Which is just a blasting power. That power makes more sense for like a rogue who's learned to like blast people with wands or something like that.
Yeah, not only is this not the archetype that I would design for a rogue, but if I were designing this archetype, these are not the powers that I would give it. It just doesn't click for me, I guess. There's nothing like wrong with this. It just seems like a sort of like weird mishmash of abilities. It doesn't seem like a very strong theme. It doesn't seem particularly interesting to me as a rogue player or even like a rogue designer. So this one gets a thumbs down from me.
The core, they get a bunch of fun features that let them do some skill-based things, but their core feature is Bolts from the Grave, which lets them shoot sneak attack damage, bolts of necrotic energy. Basically, it lets them blast people. That's their third level ability. Their high level ability, 17th, is one that sort of lets them go into wraith form mode. Which is a very video gamey power, and move around and teleport.
Shadows of Mordor. It just comes way too late to be interesting.
Right. If somehow these could be rebalanced and switched, I feel like a 17th level power where you're like, I'm full undead mode, here's a blast of necrotic energy, makes sense for a high level rogue. Whereas the very subtle one where you're like, ooh, you might not even notice this rogue had anything unusual about them. They just seem to be able to sneak to places other rogues can't. As the third level, that would make way more sense.
Yeah.
Rant over.
I mean, I just sort of like skipped over it, but Bolts from the Grave is very powerful. You're basically doing a ranged sneak attack as a bonus action anytime you use a cunning action. I guess it prevents you from also using sneak attack with your regular attack, but it's pretty good. It allows you to like move and sneak and still do damage, but again, it would work better if you already had your ethereal jaunt ghost wraith mode. So I guess I'm willing to like entertain the idea behind this. I just think it's not particularly well put together. So
all right, Rune Knight could be reworked a little bit. Swarm Keeper, super weird. We've got a disagreement on that one. Revived, this one needs some serious work.
None of these are like unsalvageable, and I can see players using them, but compared to some of the UAs that we talked about recently, they're just not as good. I guess I like the Rune Knight a lot. Rune Knight's good. The rest are not what I'd be looking for in a subclass.
Rune Knight's a very Rob class. All right, thanks for listening to Subclass Talk.
Our very brief one. We want to get to Descent to Avernus, so now we're going to talk about Baldur's Gate, Descent to Avernus.
Let's start this off with, what are your, I know we polled the hosts of this show, and among the two of us, you're the one who has the strongest feelings about the city of Baldur's Gate and fond memories of... Days Gone By.
I mean, you played the Baldur's Gate games, yes? Yes.
I was never really into them.
Played the Baldur's Gate games. I think I may have put more hours into Baldur's Gate 1 and Baldur's Gate 2 than any other video game franchise in the history of my life. So I am a Baldur's Gate and Baldur's Gate lore mega fan. I want to say, given that this doesn't really play into my opinion on Descent to Avernus. I am not, like, unhappy with the depiction of Baldur's Gate. It is a whole different bag of chips. So if you are a fan of Baldur's Gate, the video game series, or if not, don't let that affect your approach to this game. It has a very good foundation in the city of Baldur's Gate, but depending on your opinions about that, it's as important or not as important as you think it is.
All right. Well, let's talk about the adventure Matt, table the sort of appendix conversation of whether the stuff about Baldur's Gate here could be useful for anyone, even people who didn't want to run this.
Let's talk about it at the end,
adventure.
or as we are going through the parts that address Baldur's Gate. But Matt, I want to ask you, before we get into this, Matt, is this the most metal Wizards of the Coast adventure?
It's incredibly
so
brutal. It's blacker than the blackest black times
it's
1,000.
It's fucking metal. It's so brutal. Fucking metal. Yeah, it's
the first splash art is a bunch of Mad Max demons riding on hell machines powered by soul coins, fighting each other in a blasted hellscape that was once a beautiful paradise.
At one point, you delve into tunnels that are being like excavated by like gnoll demons, like out of like a giant scab on like the surface of Avernus. It's fucking metal. Yeah. The main antagonist is a fallen angel with like blood like tears. It's blood tears. Yeah, almost almost like Night Hag with skulls. Like everything in this could be like the title of like a metal song. It's so fucking good. I love every second of it. Yeah.
So this is why Rob and I love Planescape, right? Is like, yeah, you want to go to heaven, you want to go to the chaos wastes of Limbo, or like most players, you want to eventually take your adventure to hell. This adventure takes your adventure to hell and spends a great amount of time there doing very metal things.
If you ever wanted to like go to hell and throw like a bunch of like insane encounters at your players, this is the adventure for that. And I would say, like, compared to something like Strahd, which is like unexpectedly often deadly, this is expectedly deadly at every stage. Like, we'll talk about the specifics, but Avernus looks like a great way to like have a rotating cast of PCs, because some of them are gonna fucking die, and also some of those deaths are basically like scripted into the adventure, and we'll talk about that as well.
Right. It's also not a spot where you can... It's sort of built in, like, hey, you're in hell. Players can die. Here's a bunch of things that will kill them and turn them irrevocably into a demon. Or, I'm sorry, a devil.
Here's a thing that will kill you, and if you die, you will emerge from a river as a disgusting lemure, a level 0. Yeah, you're dead and cannot be resurrected. Your soul has been transformed into a creature of the abyss.
Okay, if you're planning on playing this, we're going to have to get into some spoilers. But before you say goodbye, Rob, do you have sort of an overall take that is spoiler-free?
So our overall spoiler-free. Obviously, I'm a big fan of this. I think that this is, like, tonally and in terms of content, just a super fucking great adventure. I also think that in terms of, like, what you get, like, by buying this, very good. This is one of, I think, in terms of, like, items, maps... lore, like just like extra like appendices, one of the best adventures. You get a ton of stuff. If you are a DM who is like, I might want to run this, but I also just want to like take some stuff and borrow it, one of my favorites, probably maybe even my favorite in terms of just like things that you can borrow. So good. I was really, really impressed with like how much I got in terms of just ideas and locations and maps and lore. I'm going on. I really loved,
I I'm right there with you, Rob, on all the ideas, NPCs, encounters, places, maps. I went a little different on my overall
Sure, let's hear it.
I enjoyed reading this, and I actually recommend that you get it for the stuff. I think and we'll get into this in our spoiler part of the review, the connective tissue of the actual adventure itself has some major flaws that are, I think, deep enough that I would probably spend 2 long weekends rewriting this before.
I agree with that, actually, and I was going to save that for our spoiler parts. But in terms of
So get it for the stuff, not for the plot.
if it were me, I would run the adventure radically different than it is written. I don't think it's like unsalvageable. It's not.
No, we're not saying that.
I don't really think any of the wizards are like all that. Wizards' adventures are all that bad, but it's definitely not the worst. It's just I would not. It is not like the most coherent from I guess specifically from like chapter to chapter. So if you were thinking of picking this up and just like running your characters from 1 to 13, you can do that. If you were listening to this podcast and like to tweak it all, you're probably not going to love the way that it is set up, and you're going to want to do some work. That's not a huge problem because it is such a fun book to read, full of good stuff. But the actual adventure in terms of focus and tone and ideas, like from start to finish and plot structure, has some errors, that's for sure. But this is definitely, I think, at the top of my sort of Wizards published adventure list anyway, even with all of that said. Definitely one of my top 3.
Excellent. All right. Well, if you're sticking with us from this point on, be prepared to be spoiled about specifics of Baldur's Gate: Descent into Avernus.
All right.
Okay, let's get into some specifics. Rob, do you want to do this chapter by chapter or sort of high points, low points? What do you want to do?
Let's do this chapter by chapter because I think they're all very distinct and worthy of some individual discussion. So let's go ahead and start with chapter 1, A Tale of Two Cities, which concerns... Matt doesn't love it. Baldur's Gate and the fallen city of El Turel. Matt, what do you want to say about this broadly, and then let's just do a quick overview, or go through the.
I think unsurprisingly, for an adventure where the real stuff that people want to get to is go into hell and fighting demons and devils, this chapter is by far the weakest one. It's set in Baldur's Gate, which Rob loves. I'm basically ambivalent about. And this one's a real low point for me because the way the campaign starts is the players are forced to work for a mercenary company, the Flaming Fists, which have basically taken over security for Baldur's Gate. A nearby city has been disappeared, but the players are not immediately investigating that. They're investigating some random murders in the city. How can they investigate them? Well, the murders are random. It specifically says they have no pattern. So there's really no crime to solve. And then overall, there's basically 2 long dungeon crawls. And that is your adventure in Baldur's Gate.
Matt's correct. If the sound of Sir of the Flaming Fist doesn't delight you, then this is probably not going to be particularly interesting to you.
Right. I don't care about that, and therefore was not.
If you aren't just delighted to be in Baldur's Gate, if you're not super interested in Baldur's Gate, which is a very interesting city and has a lot going on,
yes,
it's probably not great because,
which we'll talk about later. There's a whole appendix.
This is a very railroady, also part of the game. You're basically press ganged into working for the Flaming Fist, which is fine. but not great. I think that there are certain adventures where, having no options works fine. We've talked about how this works so well in Skull and Shackles. This is not great. You're right. You basically have no options. You have to work for the Flaming Fist, and they will literally execute you if you do not agree to serve, which is interesting because, it makes sense within the context of D&D in the game. They have, unlimited adventurer conscription powers, but it's just, a shitty way to start the game.
And here's why it's shitty in this particular context, right? We're not saying it's always bad, but in this context, it's bad because you present your characters with this beautiful city of scum and villainy, right? Baldur's Gate, and say, all right, are you ready to have fun in Baldur's Gate? Nope. You're going to one bathhouse, and you're going to spend 3 levels delving through one dungeon.
So immediately you are pushed into 2 completely forgettable encounters. One at a gate and one at a tavern. A cool tavern. The Elsong Tavern is neat, but again, you're just there to do your job.
Yep, we like the Elsong Tavern.
And then you've got to go to this dungeon. And as I was reading this, I haven't run it, but Jesus, this seems like an incredibly brutal dungeon. I think they're supposed to be level 3 when they get here. And I again,
they're supposed to be level 2.
And I haven't counted it out, but there's a shit ton of cultists in this dungeon, and it's a
slog.
I'm counting 33 separate rooms, which is a big dungeon. And I'm not opposed to a dungeon crawl, but there's not a lot of exploration or conversation. It just seems like you're gonna go and you're gonna kill a bunch of fucking cultists. And I'll tell you what I did like. I do like the expansion of the Dead 3. I think those are cool gods with cool cults.
Sure.
And I like the NPCs that were provided. This does not look like fun. This yeah.
Here's what happens is you're like, all right, you're press ganged into working for the Flaming Fist, which I was like, oh. All right, you have to investigate some murders by the Dead 3 cultists.
Yeah.
I'm like, all right. But then you don't actually.
No, you're just like,
this is not an episode
you actually
of Law
don't
and Order.
do any.
It's like you go to this. There's no investigation.
It's just like, go here, talk to this person. That person will tell you where to go. Here's a dungeon, which will probably, I'm gonna guess, take 3 to 4 sessions to. It's a huge fucking dungeon. It will be the.
This is why it's bad, is you could start this adventure, and if you're not an experienced DM, you could have some players who are like, I'm ready to go to hell. And you're like, the game peters out after 4 sessions of killing humans in a expanded bathhouse.
Yeah, it is not a great way to hook new players. This is definitely not an adventure I would run unmodified for new players. And it's also going to be exhausting, except for people who really, really, really love dense tactical combat. So anyway, you go through the bathhouse. I don't even remember what happens. You find out some shit about...
Well, the other thing... Yeah, there's some corrupt nobles, right? And this gets you to the plot hook, which is that Baldur's Gate could be, under an infernal contract to have suffer the same fate as
right.
The city
so sorry, we
of
sort of skipped this.
El
The city of El Turiel has disappeared from the face of Faerun. Spoilers, because it has been transported to hell and chained to the river Styx by an infernal contract. Again, fucking badass. You don't find out about that until halfway through, chapter 1. And again, that's okay, but it would be better if you...
Why not? Why not start fucking start with the opening scene of a city getting dragged to hell? Why not?
Yeah, I at the very least drop some cool hints. The thing is if you don't know what's going on and you don't prepare your players, they might just think they're investigating random murders or killing a bunch of dead god cultists in a bathhouse.
Now, I have another problem, but maybe also a suggestion. And I think this is the paradox, Rob, of canon writing.
Let's get through. There's not much to say about the rest of the encounters. Let's get through that and then talk about the whole of the chapter. So, after the dungeon, you go to another tavern where you have to deal with some other shitty evil nobles. Again, I'm a fan of the evil.
Eventually, you head to the upper city and confront the folks who have done the contract and learned some more stuff.
You go and you fight, eventually, Thalamra Vanthampur, who is one of the Grand Dukes. And I gotta say, as far as...
And you get an artifact, which is pretty good for a level 3
as far as villains
character.
go, pretty great. She's an old, like, mean lady warlock who will punch you with her, like, old mean lady fists if you get too close to her. Pretty good. Also, you can befriend a winged cat named Slobberchops, which was really the high point of the entire first chapter for me. If you...
Well, I actually have a problem with that, Rob, because if you look at the entry for the winged cat things, it says you can summon them with Find Familiar, and they are better than every other familiar. Normally, like, you need a special thing to get an enhanced familiar, but a winged cat can detect invisibility at will. Can regular familiar cats do that?
I'm sorry, Matt. I'm a big fan of the winged cat named Slobberchops. I want to make friend with a winged cat named Slobberchops.
Imbalance.
I don't care about the balance. I don't care about the balance.
It's imbalanced.
Speaking of balance, at the end of this, like, you go through the Vanthapur estate. Again, another fucking slog, followed by a second slog beneath the slog. So you go through the estate, and then there's a dungeon beneath the estate. At the end of all of this...
Slugfest.
At the end of this, you get a fucking, like, shield that has a pit fiend encased inside of it.
Now we're talking.
That gives you, pretty damn good AC bonus and resistance to fire damage. Plus, you can, like, cast fireball and shit out of it. Again, it's an artifact. No, it's a legendary item.
Now, the puzzle box for me, which holds the contract that basically reveals the mystery to the players, is in a very small box my entire critique of this adventure. The puzzle box, if I gave my players a puzzle box, which is a magical artifact that can only be unlocked by solving some mundane puzzle, very cool. How do your players solve it? They take it to an archmage who unlocks it for them. Now, this right here is like just a huge failing, right? Instead of creating an adventure where players can find clues and eventually find, I need to pour a magnetic liquid over the surface of the box, which looks like a maze, and then tilt it around until the liquid solves the maze, and then the puzzle box will open. Instead of them having them find that clues, they just take it to an NPC, and the NPC says, a puzzle box. Here, I can solve this for you.
Yeah. It sucks.
It's what a huge, and this adventure is full of things exactly like that.
The other thing about this is that you can try to solve it, but it's a DC 30 intelligence check, and if you fail, you take 12d6 psychic damage, which is, like, enough to, like, knock most of your players unconscious or possibly instantly kill them, which is just like a really... And if you fail by more than 5, which I think they're going to do every single time, I don't think it's possible for players at that level.
Yeah. You have a +5 intelligence, you're gonna fail by 5.
So it just seems like, it just, I don't know, either make, I get that you want to, I wouldn't do this. Anyway, let's blow past the rest of it. You go to Candlekeep, you find a scholar who can do this for you. The last part is actually kind of great. This is actually kind of bonkers. The person that you meet at Candlekeep who solves the puzzle box for you can plane shift you to Avernus, but she won't. So she's like, go to this other person who can plane shift you to Avernus, who turns out to be an archmage who turned himself into an otter, which is
why
great.
not?
And you meet this otter mage Traxigor, where you also meet the Lulu the Holophant, who is either the best or worst part of this entire adventure, depending on your point of view. A Holophant is a...
Right. Your players are either going to fucking hate this annoying, good little, cute, plushy toy of
it is a
flying, NPC,
fuzzy
or they're going to
elephant.
hate them.
Not very metal. Except, I guess, when she can transform into a giant golden mammoth, which is a little bit metal. But listen to the description of Lulu. Lulu doesn't have a mean bone in her little body. She believes in the power of friendship and looks forward to kicking evil's butt with the characters at her side. I kind of like it, but also it is weirdly out of sync with the gruesomely metal tone of the rest of the adventure. We'll talk about like what kind of like players and parties will work well with this, but I don't think it's like a jarring tonal mismatch, but some players are probably going to like have signed up for a super metal adventure and be annoyed by this. And some players are going to love Slobberchops, the winged cat, and Lulu, the flying elephant, and Traxagor, the otter mage.
Okay, so that's the end of chapter 1. Thoughts? Now, here's my thoughts on chapter 1, Rob, which is, I think this is the paradox of writing a canon adventure and setting it in such a beloved city as Baldur's Gate. On one hand, there's pressure to start your adventure in a city that people are familiar with. But on the other hand, they're unwilling, for example, to transport Baldur's Gate itself to hell as the start of the adventure, right? Because that would fuck up too many canon things. So transport a lesser known city that no one cares about.
Have you ever heard of El Turiel? Was it made up for this adventure?
No.
I'll look. Sorry, listeners, for not being prepared. I probably should have looked this up, but I've never heard of it. And apparently, it has a giant, or until recently, had a giant floating daylight orb to protect it from evil vampires and things, which seems significant.
Now, and that plays a lot into the plot. Now, here are two ways that this would be better. It would be better if Baldur's Gate goes to hell at the start of the adventure, or if your players, instead of being at Baldur's Gate, are from El Turiel, right? Their city has been transported to hell, right? And so, I mean, this is just the paradox. It doesn't work as well with this sort of, as it's put in the title, Tale of Two Cities. A Tale of One City would be a much better tale.
We'll talk at the end about what we recommend about this first chapter. One easy hack would be to make your players refugees from El Turiel. That would make this bit, again, if you're going to do nothing else, say you are refugees from El Turiel. That would make this a little bit more interesting. You would still have all the problems with this chapter that we have, but it would at least make a bit more sense and add some intensity to it. But the chapter 1, largely forgettable, very frustrating. I think it would probably do better if it were not for how much more interesting the other chapters are, but by comparison, it looks real bad. So that's chapter 1.
Okay, chapter 2 is takes place on the fallen city of El Turiel. Players are floating above the plane of Avernus, which is the first level in the 9 hells of Bator.
Yeah. So Avernus, for the uninitiated, is, again, the first level of hell. It is a battleground between devils and demons. The battleground, I think, like the main place where the fighting takes place. If you are not familiar with the planes, devils are lawful evil, demons are chaotic evil, and they are constantly at war for the fate of the multiverse. I suppose if they ever stopped fighting, they would overrun everything. Fortunately, they will never stop fighting. But Avernus is where all that bloodshed takes place. Again, for further context, the archdevil in charge used to be Bel. It is now
Bel, the first pit
it is now Zariel, the fallen Solar, a badass fallen angel who hated demons with such ferocity that she fell so she could kill demons more better.
Because the devils are better at killing demons than the angels.
She was unhappy that the angels weren't good enough, or weren't serious enough about killing demons. Anyway, so you arrive in El Turiel, which is, on fire. It is chained by gigantic, hell metal chains.
Chains.
And is sinking down towards the river Styx, which, if you're submerged in it, you forget everything, and if you stay there long enough, your soul is turned into a demon, or a devil, to fight in the eternal devil wars. Again, very metal. So the city's on fire. It's full of demons and devils and undead, and you got to fight your way to find the Grand Duke Ravengard, which is one of the tenuous Baldur's Gate connections that we sort of forgot to talk about. Mm-hmm. He was on some sort of diplomatic mission to Elturiel. Oh, fuck, we forgot all about the guy who actually, like, made this pact. He was in chapter 1.
Right.
Sorry, going back...
Yeah. You find him later. He's now a devil.
Yeah, so I completely forgot about this, but it's the... Oh, fuck, I'm gonna look up his name real fast. As you can tell, this isn't super important, or else we would have mentioned it.
I mean, the idea, the driver of the plot is this guy has made a pact to protect his city.
Thavius Krieg.
Thavius Krieg
abandoned his faith and to protect his city or protect himself or whatever, made a deal with Zariel, and
which is great in that this later encourages your players to sign infernal contracts with devils. Which is super fun.
So the long and short of it is that the part of the deal was that after a certain amount of time, Avernus would be dragged to hell. And you find Thavius Krieg under the Valamthur manor, and he begs for his life, and you can kill him, you can't kill him. He really doesn't matter, but it is important because he's the one who sort of, like, made the deal and is important to, like, understanding, like, why this happened. Anyway, so he's not in Elturiel.
Chapter 3.
Grand Duke Ravengard is, so you gotta find him for some reason. And I gotta be honest, Matt, despite the fact that this is super cool, like a floating city in hell, full of, like, commoners who are being attacked by, like, demons and devils, I found this kind of, like, entirely forgettable. When I was going back to, like, look this over, I couldn't remember anything that happened in this chapter.
Yeah, chapter 2 is a disappointing chapter that should be 2 encounters before your players get to hell. It's like, hey, you're in hell. Wait, not yet. Hold on. You got to level up and go through a million fights with demons.
I mean, here's the thing. This could be incredibly cool. It's not. Again, the city dragged to hell is awesome. Either make this longer and better or make it shorter. But as is, it's just a bunch of fights, a bunch of mostly forgettable NPCs.
If I was writing this adventure, chapter 1 would be the city before it's dragged to hell. Chapter 2 would be the city dragged to hell. And then, it would be a rehash of going back to places you've been before, defending them from demons, and then on to chapter 3, right? Which is actually getting to Avernus.
If you get amped by, like, cool fights, and I kind of do, like, there's a lot going for it. Like, the city's, like, shaking as it gets dragged down, like lightning strikes from the this is cool, the, like, orb that floats over Elturiel, which was, like, holy and white, is now, like, black and evil. It's called the Companion, and so, like, lightning strikes from there, like, every however many rounds. So, like, there's some really cool, like, fights. There's, like, bridges over the river Styx. It's just, I would just do it differently, I guess. It's just, like, a bunch of fighting without, like, much to recommend it. It's just, you could make this a lot more interesting. There's a big slog through the cathedral to get to Grand Duke Ravengard.
Let's get to the part we really like, which is at the end of this chapter, you have to find a way to, like, parachute or feather fall outside the demon devil siege around the city, down to the lair of Avernus, and then that's finally when things get metal.
Yeah, so
awesome.
You can climb down the chains. You can, like, create, like, a flying balloon. You can buy a bunch of, like, scrolls of fly. You can feather fall. You can make a glider. But you got to get down. And all of these are, like, fraught with danger. And this is one of those times when, if your players are dumb, they can just get murdered, because if they just, like, drop to the middle of a battlefield full of, like, demons and devils, they'll just get instantly murdered. So that's one of those places where it should be obvious to, like, smart players to, like, think this through. But if they're not thinking it through, it's a great way for them to all end up dead really fast. So this is cool. Yeah. This is awesome. And then you finally get to go to actual hell.
are sort of avoiding this fight between demons and devils, and we find out there's a whole sub-ecology of Mad Max scavengers that feed off the remnants of the Blood War. And this is my favorite part of the adventure. You're introduced to 4 or 5 warlords. I wish this adventure was called Warlords of Avernus.
Exactly. I was reading this part and I was like, this fucking rules. This is so awesome. Everything about this is so fucking good. You get down, you go to this Fort Knucklebone, that's run by a hag, Mad Maggie. And it's got a bunch of like scavengers and madcaps and redcaps and just like Mad Max weirdos, and you need to like make friends and like get like a, you know, hell vehicle to travel across Avernus, because it's a big, you know, plane and you gotta like go.
Right. It's infinite in size. So, yeah, you need a hell vehicle, and you're introduced to Mad Maggie herself is a warlord. There's an evil werebore, a very goth necromancer, and a couple of devils that have left the ranks of the hellish army, who are now their own independent warlords, and they're all super cool and flavorful. And this is a perfect spot for your players to find alliances with warlords or fight them. They go visit a metal tree on which is internally impaled a beautiful elf vampire. It's great.
God, the warlords are so cool. There's one that's like this like frail like archmage with like a bone parasol that, you know, drives a giant like grinder machine with ghouls, and then there's, you know, a bunch of fallen devils with like outcasts to like crew their things. There's a, you know, a werebore named Rada Draga. There's Mad Maggie. Again, this part could have been 3 times as long and included so many more warlords.
Yes.
So fucking cool. So fucking cool. It makes you just want to run an adventure that's just like Mad Max in Avernus. You're like, if I'm genuinely tempted to skip everything and just like start an adventure where you have to like retrofit a vehicle and like, you know, make a name for yourself on the like hellscape of Avernus. You know, you're encouraged to like retrofit these vehicles with like spikes and harpoons, and like there's all these great rules for chases, and this is just like so much more interesting and so much more inspired than anything else we've seen so far. And it fucking rules. It is awesome. Maggie has like a flame skull named Barnabas, who has his own you know, machine. The red caps will like drive one. There's 2 like scavenging Kenku named Clonk and something else. Chukka and Clonk. Yeah, it's just great.
So I think this illustrates the high point of this entire adventure for me, but it also, in a nutshell, tells you what's good about Descent to Avernus. Is all of the like NPCs in this adventure are just amazing art, amazing NPC design, right? Kostashi, the demon giant, these warlords, all the NPCs, even the ones in parts of the adventure we like less, like back in Baldur's Gate.
Yeah, the NPCs in the first 2
are really well designed.
The NPCs in the first 2 chapters, again, they're wrapped in a bunch of bullshit, but they're really interesting and like, you know, taken out of like sort of like the boring plot in Slog, are pretty good. Just sort of forgettable compared to this.
A bunch more things happen in Avernus, but eventually your players, if they want to stop Baldur's Gate and save Elturel and stop Baldur's Gate from suffering the same fate, they have to eventually find Zariel's sword, right? An artifact that Lulu hid, but Lulu doesn't remember where it is, that can restore the spark of goodness to Zariel, or at least allow the players to negotiate with Zariel and save the city. The way the players get there, in my opinion, is sort of good and bad. They can kind of choose to go to the demon-infested part of Avernus or the devil part. The adventure lays it out as Path of Demons or Path of Devils. There are amazing encounters in both of these. However, they're both sort of a little frustrating, or I would find my players would find them frustrating in that it's basically a series of an NPC says, I think I know where the Sword of Zariel is. It's here. The players go there, they do a thing for someone, and then that person says, well, I don't have it, but I think it's here. And they do that like seven times. Again, my critique is the NPCs and encounters and things are amazing. The connective tissue sucks.
You've got two paths.
Sucks
the path
demon
of devils,
balls.
path of demons. Both are basically really long, frustrating fetch quests with really no way to like circumvent the fetch quest part. The actual, like Matt says, the NPCs and the locations are awesome, but like you're gonna get there and your players gonna be like, well, why the fuck do I have to like get this like Titan blood for this asshole? Like, is there not any better way? Sorry, I do want to mention one thing. Speaking of fucking metal.
Yeah.
the place that Lulu is finally like, oh, I remember where the Sword of Zariel is you go to a hell wasp nest, which is where they lay eggs in the corpses of angels. Like, how fucking metal is that? It's so fucking good.
Yeah, here's the thing is it's like this part of the adventure, if you could retool it once the players get their infernal Mad Max demon machine as a sandbox that lets them explore the layer of hell and eventually find the sword, that would be great, right? What's the point of letting your players have a fun vehicle if they don't get to explore? Oh, by the way, Rob, we both forgot to mention this. In the first chapter, the players get the rights
that's right.
to a
Fuck.
ship. I think so many players would be like, all right, we're out.
We're going somewhere else. I know.
Why would you do that?
The adventure like mentions this offhandedly. It's like, well, but you need this many people to crew it, and they can't sell it because nobody wants to buy it. But I'm like, how do you expect your players to like stick to the plot if you gave them a ship? Anyway, yeah.
Yeah. I just love all these. Okay, let's get more positive. I just love all these encounters. The Hell Wasp, the chained demon Kostachichi.
Yeah, he's just like a giant, like a giant demon, like a demon that loves, or a devil that loves giants. I don't know exactly what he is.
A wrecked demon or a devil flying fortress, which is like a flying evil bomber.
Yeah, there's like a bunch of bone brambles of like bone trees, and in the middle there's a hag with like, I love this description. Strings of infants' skulls hang around her neck and chatter nursery rhymes incessantly. Like, how fucking, again, it's just so good.
You might have to go negotiate with Bell, who could easily crush you, but he wants to get rid of Zariel. He's like all for redeeming Zariel because that will get her off of Avernus.
Yeah. Bell is a great character because he's like agreeable and friendly, but like obviously evil as shit, and like gives the players like just enough like to cause problems, but like not enough to actually do anything. Bell's a great character. There's
Yenagog makes an appearance. Now, also, Tiamat is here. I could care less about her. It's always weird that she's on a lawful evil plane. She's always the most misplaced character in the multiverse. So is Joe Manganiello's character, Archon the Cruel, makes an appearance. I mean, I don't give a fuck about that because I don't care about other people's characters. But I suppose it's an interesting NPC.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah, and he's got the Hand of Vecna, which, again, I like that. Like a little, like, little throwback to an old artifact. Here's the thing. There's like 10,000 awesome encounters here. Like, I already forgot about this, but, like, there's a you can go, like, down into, like, in a bathysphere into the river Styx. There's the Wandering Emporium, which we haven't even mentioned. They're run by a Rakshasa. There's just like, there's so much good shit.
Plus, the final end of this is great. It's like your players got to decide how to deal with Zariel and the contract, right? And it's completely up to them. They probably cannot kill Zariel, though they could certainly try. Their options are either destroy the sword as a favor to Zariel so that she can forever
wait, Matt.
be a
we're
devil.
We're skipping a chapter before we get to that. Let's talk about chapter 4, The Sword of Zariel itself, right? It's still part of like basically the same like wandering, but again, this is awesome. There's a citadel when Zariel fell, like she planted her sword and like gave it to her lieutenants. Oh, you can also find her lieutenants. We kind of skipped over this. One of them's a Death Knight, one of them's a devil. But like the area where this like giant like holy citadel is like so awful to Avernus that a giant literal scab has grown up around it. You fight a bunch of Knoll demons and Yenogu's servants.
Yenogu. Whatever. Who knows how to say any of the demons?
He makes an appearance. There's also some like dreamscape stuff with Lulu, which I actually think is pretty good, pretty well done. Both here and earlier, you have to get into her memories and like replay some stuff. So you get the sword, and I wanted to talk about this, Matt, because this is actually kind of important before we get to what happens with Zariel. So you find the sword. You need it to either convince Zariel to, break her pact or turn her back or do anything, right? She's way too powerful for players to actually do anything to. So the sword is the only chance you have. When you pick up the sword, there's like the ghost of one of her lieutenants tells you that the hero becomes one with this blade, exists no longer. Which of you is brave enough to draw the blade and be gone forever?
You get entirely new traits as a character.
I wanted to address this because generally I think this is strongly something to avoid. However, I think that this works in the context of this adventure.
Right. This is at the conclusion of a very long adventure, right? Or at least the final part. And, if you want players to make a good sacrifice for the greater good, or a sacrifice to become powerful, sure. It's like, kiss your character goodbye. You're basically an angel now.
Yeah. It's an obscenely powerful sword, obviously. I guess this also plays into sort of like the finale, but I do think that this adventure sort of assumes either a good party or a mixed party, because I can't imagine an evil party or someone in an evil party making this decision willingly. With that in mind, I don't know. That was, I guess, what I was thinking. So normally I would advise against this, but I think it works within the context of the adventure. Final chapter. Love the final chapter. So Matt started to talk about this, but you're sort of given...
Well, I mean, players basically, once they have the sword, finally the adventure opens up after like 11 levels, and it's like, all right, you've got a bunch of decisions to make and different ways of accomplishing them. Do you want to try and redeem Zariel? Do you want to, knowing that Bel will now become ruler of this level, do you want to try and destroy the sword in exchange for Zariel avoiding the contracts on Baldur's Gate and El Terrell, knowing that this will leave Zariel forever as a devil? Like, you really get to decide what course of action you want to take.
Yeah. So what I love about this chapter is that it doesn't start with like a map or an encounter. It says, this is how your players can resolve this like.
Do you want to go to Tiamat? Do you want to have a giant demon gnaw these chains out? Do you want to free the solar?
Yeah. Are you going to like recruit like a demon or another devil? Are you going to like sacrifice your soul? Are you going to possibly put somebody
and this is the shortest chapter, but it could easily be the longest in play.
Yes. And at the end, it's like, here's this epic battle that's happening at El Turiel. And I love this because normally the way these are set up in most adventures is you start with the encounter and then you reach the end, like after you defeat this person. Here's what your players might do. But I love that it says, gives a whole bunch of options for resolving what is basically like a, multiverse spanning, decision or conflict, and describes the way the players might approach it, and it doesn't give too much guidance, but it definitely like lays out the difficulty and the complexity of this.
Oh, I was gonna say, one of the problems with this is that your players at this point might be so Pavlovianly trained to follow a plot where they go talk to some cool, weird NPC who says, now go here. And then the next one says, now go here, that they might be at a loss for what to do with such a fun, open-ended thing. My one critique is that if the previous chapter was also like this, hey, players, to solve this, you must find the Sword of Zariel. Here's a million different options to go about finding and reclaiming the sword. If the previous chapter was sort of a practice run for this one, this would make this even better.
Yeah. And the adventure kind of like acknowledges that. Like if you go back to Bell, he's like, "Oh, I didn't expect to see you again. I told you exactly what to do." And like it's kind of like uncomfortable about it because it implicates him in like trying to undermine Zariel.
Right, which Asmodeus might not like, or might in fact actually like. He loves his subordinates fighting.
Right, which is, again, I didn't mention this, but like the tips on role-playing the devils are just top notch. I really like the way the devils are written in this, because I think devils are of the clearly like afterthought giant multiverse hell world that, you know, Gygax or one of his, you know, subsidiaries invented 30 years ago. The way that they have been developed is the most interesting. I think the devils are just super cool antagonists and very, very fun to play because of their obsession with contracts and things like that. But, you know, you can ally with all sorts of people. Like Matt said, Tiamat is an option. Don't love it. I don't love that Tiamat is included here, though it is kind of cool that you can like coax her out and she'll like fly around and blast all the chains of Avernus. You know, that's a pretty like epic ending. Depending on how you play this out, like you can end up seeing Baphomet or, you know, Yenogu or Tiamat or all these like gigantic like mega bosses who you will not be able to fight, but will be like engaged in combat with you know, another archdevil or something. So it's a suitably epic ending. So the long and short of it is, so the thing that's the sort of like the big, like, I guess you've probably already figured this out, your players did, is that the companion, the big orb, is actually like a chained planetar. And what you need to do is release it. And you can either do this by smashing it with a sword or inserting all these adamantine keys that you can get from Zariel's Flying Fortress, or Zariel can do it herself. And there's a lot of different ways to go about this. Like Matt says, if your players are used to being like, well, what do we do now? And an NPC will tell them, they're going to be a little bit lost. And so if they've got like Lulu or somebody, they can like tell them what to do, but it would obviously be better and more satisfying if they try to figure it on their own and they reach this on their own. There's sort of two things that you have to do. So you have to save Elturiel, and you have to decide what to do about Zariel. So you can either redeem her, kill her, or make a deal, which is a very devil thing to do. And the adventure gives a bunch of ways of doing this. Frankly, redemption, which seems like the best option, is easier than I thought it would be. So it's basically a persuasion check, which, fine, a very high one, but you can reduce it to a pretty manageable check if you bring Lulu and the Death Knight Elanthius, one of her lieutenants, with you. So you can reduce it to like a DC 15, which feels anticlimactic. You know, I guess like you came this far and you brought the sword and you suffered, so like maybe not, but this is really like a deep flaw with D&D as a system. So if I were a DM, I would require like a whole lot of talking before I like let them get to the actual roll. But I guess like there's no other way to like make this have any meaning or
I think this is another spot where there could be multiple opportunities for success, which is something as a dungeon master you should always think about when designing an encounter. It could be a convincing persuasion check that requires you to bring in the reminders of her goodness, or it could be plunging the sword into or cutting off the 3 lead feathers on her wings with her own sword, and then, you know, blinding her with it or something, and this would remind her of her goodness or something. You're right. Have multiple ways that they could redeem her.
I will say, as written, at the end of the adventure, this is a very satisfying conclusion. It doesn't feel like cheap. It doesn't feel like... It feels justified, right? You've brought this, like, holy artifact back to her to, like, remind her of who she was. You absolutely earned it. Like, but it just... I think it should be a little bit more significant. That being said, if you do fail this, I actually like what happens if you do fail. Because then you gotta fight her. And you can kill her. But you gotta, like, bring in some help because she's a level 26 archdevil, right? So you gotta recruit, one of the demons, Baphomet, how do you say, Coach?
Yeah.
Not even gonna try it. Or Yunogu, or Bell, or release the Pit Fiend, or even, like, recruit Tiamat. But, like, this obviously opens up some questions about what happens afterwards, right? If you've... Allying with any demon is not a great plan. Or you could even, like, swear fealty to Zariel in exchange for returning Alturiel to the surface. And one of my favorite possible options...
You could become agents in the Blood War, for sure.
Yeah, which is actually a pretty cool ending for, like, an evil party, is to, like, pledge your loyalty to Zariel. Because then you get to fight demons, and you're sort of like, if you're lawful evil, this is actually kind of a great ending.
Right. You could easily imagine Zariel sending them back to another plane to carry out some mission. Maybe they go to Sigil or back to Faerun to counter demons' plans there.
One of my favorite options is that, and I would have just I'm glad they wrote this out, but I would have, like, if this were presented to me by a player unexpectedly, I would have jumped on it. But a good aligned paladin or cleric can sacrifice their soul, can pledge their soul to Zariel, and in exchange for this, she will return Alturiel to the surface and, free it from its, hell dimension. Which is just, like, a super awesome ending for any adventurer. If this is, like, your final act, if your campaign is wrapping and you're a paladin, what a great way to go out, right? Like, what a satisfying ending. So this is great. So there's a whole bunch of ways to end this. All of them I think are pretty good. I don't think there's any, like, one ending that is better than any others. One of the things that I loved when I was thinking about what happens next, I love this bit, and this is just, like, sort of like a throwaway paragraph, but idealistic characters seeking to destroy the Nine Hells from inside out might see the power vacuum as an opportunity to strike a mortal blow to Asmodeus' reign. This might be the only time in cosmic history that such a blindly idealistic cause could succeed. But even if the party can wrest Avernus from Asmodeus' control, this ultimately serves to unite the remaining Archdevils, aligning them to the common goal of reclaiming Avernus. So I think this would be a great post-Avernus adventure, is the ultimately doomed but incredibly awesome attempt to just sort of, like, reclaim Avernus. So, and this would be a great opportunity for your Mad Max, hell vehicle adventure to go on ad infinitum.
Right. Going on to even more crazy levels of hell, ice hell, etc.
Yeah, you've got, like, a whole, like,
hell where it's made out of flesh. Yeah. The thing that you could do, that you would want to do if this is what you might envision the campaign being, is you would want to foreshadow the fact that Asmodeus, this is all as Asmodeus wills.
Right, everything works in his
whole
benefit.
Blood War, he seems, he never takes
no outcome. Yeah, no outcome is bad for him.
Put in that he's pushing people in certain directions.
Yeah, whether Bell rules or Zariel rules, it's all good to him. He's still, he's still King Devil. He's still probably, like, doing as well in the Blood War as he wants to do, So, like, everything, he's happy with whatever. But if you could, like, poke a stick in Asmodeus' eye, that's pretty cool. And, this is, like, the only outcome that does that. And it's doomed to fail because he's fucking Asmodeus, but it's still pretty cool.
Now that we're at the end, I would love to hear both of our thoughts on ways we would change or mix up this adventure. And while you're thinking of that, I'll start, right? Rob and I love Planescape, right? I would, perhaps replace the middle or opening chapters with adventures on other planes. Perhaps the players, after a single level, heading to Sigil or something like that. So players can kind of really get involved with other planes besides Avernus.
Yeah, I would I would not include chapter 1. It's not like the worst chapter, but I would either start the players at level 3 or 4 or whatever and just have them dragged to hell in Alturiel. Just start there, or have it be Baldur's Gate and have them be dragged to hell and they have to like get their shit together right away. Or I would have them...
Right, maybe the only way they can escape hell is by also saving Elturel or something like that.
Well, and that's part of the bit, right? If you're Elturian, you put your name in a book that says, I pledge to serve body and soul Elturiel, which is pretty clever because then when they're all dragged to hell, none of them can escape, and that's like the whole like soul sacrifice ideal to Zariel. So like you just say, oh, you're a citizen of Elturiel, you put your name in this book, it's a standard like oath of citizenship, and then bam, you're all in hell. You literally can't leave until you free the entire city from its like bond, right? Fucking badass, right?
Here's what I would do is I would, for the first level adventure, say, "Hell, welcome, fair adventurers. You serve the bright and shining city of Elturiel." The players go off, they kill 3 kobolds, and they're hailed as heroes, and all of a sudden the city gets dragged to hell.
I mean, the thing is...
You're like, surprise, we're playing Descent Into Avernus.
The thing is, you could like write a much better and more interesting opening adventure that like really like builds Elturiel up and like introduce some of these ideas and characters, and then suddenly they get dragged to hell, which would be still not as good as just like starting with that, but way better than this like random unrelated shit in Baldur's Gate.
Right. Chapter 2 becomes so much more strong if, for example, the players had experienced the city before it became all hellified.
So I would do that. Because I do like the idea of starting, like, again, I like starting at level 1. The players get to know each other. They get to know their characters. God, the first chapter also feels so rushed. They go from, like, level 1 to level 5, and it feels like it happens so fucking fast, not counting the endless slog through dungeons.
It's because they have 1,000 encounters in the dungeons that all give them experience. The other thing I would change is there's so many opportunities, like I mentioned before with the puzzle box here, to let the players take the initiative instead of having some random NPC, which admittedly these NPCs are very cool, do the thing for them, right? Have them open the puzzle box. Have them find out how they want to solve problem X, Y, and Z.
The other thing I would do is, I love the setting of Elturiel in Avernus. Like, again, a city chained to, like, sinking into the river Styx. But rather than just, like, a bunch of random encounters to find some fucking duke that nobody cares about, they're trying to save their friends. They're trying to, like, drive the demons out of their city. They're trying to, like, create, like, a safe zone, right? Broaden that. Make it longer. Add more encounters. Again, they know the city. Build up the city. Have them, like, they need to, like, you know, make, like, a small zone safe for the surviving citizenry before they can, like, go out and start their, like, hell adventure. God, the like, ideas are so good. And it's not that bad, but, like, it's just... They're not leaning on, like, the best stuff as much as I would like them to. Obviously, I would also...
They've got the best ideas, but the execution of adventure writing 101 is a little lacking.
I would also basically take everything from chapter 3, like the Descent to Avernus part, and like Path of Devils, Path of Demons, and the Scab, and just like sort of put it into a hex map, right? And just like you hear all these encounters. Here's the clues that you...
Where do you want to take your demon hell machine next?
You do need to find the Sword of Zariel.
Let the players decide.
You need to find the Sword of Zariel. But instead of like having a bunch of like arbitrary NPCs who are like, oh, I'll tell you where it is, but if you gotta bring me Titan blood...
I need 3 demonic gnolls ears before I'll tell you.
You might spend more time if you like go to the wrong, you know, hexes, or you like encounter something that's too badass for you too soon. But like open it up. Let them like do some...
But who cares?
Let them like roam around on their, hell Mad Max vehicle for a while and fight, other warlords. Put 3 times as many warlords in there. Make some of them schmucks, make some of them terrifying. God.
Yeah, you always need the pathetic gang, the orphans from the warriors.
That's right. Yeah, you need but like
the one that the players can easily
make that longer and yeah, but it's so interesting, and it really, like, it does do a lot to expand the lore of Avernus and the Nine Hells and the Blood War in a good, interesting way. It adds some very memorable characters and gives it a little bit of structure and context that it lacks from just like lore descriptions. So this is a great adventure. It just doesn't. Yeah. Just some parts of it are just like a lot more great than other parts are.
All right, Rob, do we have, I think that's a good set of final thoughts on this adventure. Do we have time? Do you want to talk about this Gazetteer of Baldur's Gate?
Yeah, yes.
Which you also get, in addition to great new monsters, almost all of them demons and devils.
Yeah.
And some really cool artifacts that we've already pretty much talked about.
There's an appendix on diabolical deals, which I like a lot. It's a little bit...
I forgot about that. And on the demon
It's
machines.
a little bit like that bit from... was it... from Mordenkainen's, right? That had, blessings that you could get. I like it. It's fun. I really like the stats for the Infernal War Machines and the rules for running them. We have complained excessively about ship combat. They do a really good job here of describing how you might run Infernal War Machines. Also, I think this is the first book that is at one point it explicitly says these work best as like theater of the mind combats, which they do. And
of course they do.
You say, you roll this well, it's now, 100 yards closer. They start firing harpoons on you. Don't map it out. Just, keep like rough estimations, put on some, exciting guitar music in the background and just like, describe the combat. But yeah, the Gazetteer.
What a lovely day.
Yeah. See you. Shining Chrome, Matt. So the Gazetteer is good. It's great. It's just like the Waterdeep Gazetteer. It's a great... I wouldn't buy this just for the Gazetteer. It is a great thing to be included. It does a good job of describing Baldur's Gate. If you are a Baldur's Gate fan, I would buy this book because it definitely gives you the tools you need to run a game in Baldur's Gate. If you're not, I wouldn't not buy this book.
Baldur's Gate is perhaps one of the worst places, though, for this adventure because it's so big and cool and inviting. And it's like you can spend an entire campaign here. Yeah. Right? Because it's such a cool city. There's 100,000 people there and a million different districts and NPCs that are all super great.
It seems like Wizards is trying to like introduce all of their like major cities. Like I wouldn't be surprised if the next one is like Neverwinter, something, something, something. But Baldur's Gate just seems not super relevant to this, which is unfortunate because it's a great setting. It's a cool city. It's too big to be one part of one chapter. It just feels tacked on. However, if you like Baldur's Gate, there's a lot here. It will give you the tools you need to run an adventure in Baldur's Gate. And
there's a set of player backgrounds for being from Baldur's Gate.
I also really like the expansion of the Cults of the Dead 3. That's a great hook for any sort of adventure. Not this one. Because Bale and Merkel and Bane don't appear anywhere in any of the Avernus bits, but...
Yeah. Isn't one of them lawful evil? Shouldn't their headquarters be down there somewhere? I guess it's on a different level of hell.
I have... It feels like a missed opportunity. Anyway.
Hell works best when you forget that gods live there and just pretend it's just the archdevils, the archdukes of hell.
So, but... I do like this stuff, and it's as good as the Waterdeep and Ciridian in Waterdeep Dragon Heist, which is great, and it really gives like the flavor and feel of Baldur's Gate. So yeah, this is a great thing. You really get a lot with this book. Like they did not have to include the Gazetteer, they didn't have to include a lot of this extra stuff, and they did, and I'm glad they did. It's great. It's good stuff. Good stuff.
Yeah, I would play a Baldur's Gate game. Maybe not top of my list, but again, it's a good Gazetteer of a city. This is a great adventure. Amazing NPCs, set pieces, incredibly deadly. Man, just that connective tissue.
I would not recommend running this like purely as written. If you were, it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world.
No, it would be okay.
The middle part is just so much cooler and stronger. I will say this is definitely like a little wacky, right? So if you're a very serious, like, I don't know, if your players are very serious, very like, maybe they don't like, you know, like hellpunk type stuff, like the Flying Fortress. There was this one description which I just absolutely fucking love, but like, you know, it mentions at one point that, you know, there's a soothing female voice saying something in Infernal, which is, "You are important. Promotion is your destiny. Asmodeus loves you." And it just like, I love this shit. Like, I love the Hollyphant. I love the, like, you know, the pipe that sucks up souls from the sticks. I love the, like, hell bike that you can ride and do wheelies on. But, like, if you're trying to run, like, a very, like, high adventure, serious game, there are going to be, like, tone bits of this that don't really match. So I guess that's something to bear in mind, but I have long lost interest in sort of like standard Lord of the Rings high fantasy stuff, and I want to get weird and I want to get wacky, and I want there to be, you know, NPCs that like wink and nod, and, you know, I love this. But be warned that I guess that if that's not your cup of tea, that there's a lot of that in this. So
this adventure takes the Planescape approach to hell, which is, fuck it. We're all miserable here. We're at least going to be crazy and weird.
The thing is, it's funny. Like, there are actually, like, funny bits in this adventure. It's weird. It's also, like, pretty intense at parts. Like, there's, again, you know, a lot of, like, torture and flesh and murder and, you know, beautiful vampire lords impaled on spikes for all eternity, and you know, infant skulls and child sacrifice, and you know, gnolls that eat everything in sight. So, you know, I guess be aware of that.
Yeah, I got a little weirded out where I got to the part where it said you should sacrifice some children to Moloch, and
that's right.
I was like, whoa, what's going on here? What is Wizards of the Coast trying to tell me?
There's actually there's actually
the part's
this is really
not
funny,
in
Matt,
there.
because there's a disclaimer here that says, "Advise that you not play this adventure backwards, lest Asmodeus appear in a puff of smoke to talk politics, as archfiends are wont to do," which is sort of funny because, yeah, it's acknowledging the the satanic panic, which maybe we'll have a return when parents are like, "Hey, there's devils on my child's Dungeons and Dragons book," but we'll see.
Yes, there are. We're back. We don't even call them the Ba'atazu anymore.
But yeah, this is great. I really liked it. We talked about this for a long time. And so I hope this was useful to you. If you have questions, if you have thoughts, if you have anything that you want to talk about that we didn't cover, let us know. Email us, dmofnone@gmail.com. Add us on Twitter, @dmofnone. Thanks for listening, everybody. We'll be back next week. Keep rolling them dice.
So long.